Though the N64 launched with only 2 games, it wouldn't be long before more hit the market. Most of the games that Nintendo had in production before they gave the all-hands-on-deck order for Super Mario 64 were basically done. They just needed a little more work to get them over the finish line. One of the first to make it out the door following the launch was Wave Race 64. In case any of you are wondering, yes, there was just a plain old Wave Race. It was a basic top-down racer for the Game Boy that had a shallow jet ski theme, nothing all that special. So then that begs the question, of all the games to make it to the N64 for a follow-up, why Wave Race? Well, based on my research, Wave Race 64 doesn't seem to have started out life as a Wave Race game. The game entered production when an EAD programmer demonstrated a graphical technique he had come up with to Miyamoto. Through a combination of several of the N64's graphical effects, he could create believable-looking water effects with realistic wave physics. Miyamoto would get the team a green light for a boat racing game, but as the game started to take shape, it wasn't doing it for Miyamoto. The original plan was for the players to control transforming speedboats, but there was something about that idea in practice that Miyamoto felt made the game unsatisfying to play. Chris Stamper of Rare would suggest switching to jet skis, and that ended up working out. This was probably when someone pointed out that Nintendo already had a jet ski racer, and thus this boat racer became a wave race game. It's funny how that works out, doesn't it?
Welcome to Sunny Beach.
There isn't any story to talk about here, it's just 4 people racing around on jet skis. There isn't even anything of interest about the characters apart from David Marin, who people remember simply because he's a heavier set fellow. People seem to get a kick out of watching someone with that body type do barrel rolls on a jet ski. Can't say I appreciate that considering I'm pretty hefty myself. That's probably why I never play as him. While the story and characters aren't of note, the presentation certainly is. The character models look great and are believably animated. The levels are surprisingly varied, with location dudettes beds like beachfronts, resorts, through to more unique locations like Navy bases, freight harbors, and Arctic waters. It also runs pretty well too, which is important in this case, as you need a rock-solid performance in order to convey a strong sense of speed. I also really like the music here. Looking at Wave Race 64, I'm sure most people would expect the soundtrack to be a lot of hard rock, maybe along the lines of a Tony Hawk game, but that's not what we have here. The music honestly wouldn't be out of place in a Mario Kart game, and that gives it a very chill and timeless feel. The real showstopper here are the water effects, which are still impressive today. It reacts as you race through it, the way it reacts in accordance to the level geometry is amazing, and it can be breathtaking to look at. Even today, I can think of very few games that portray water in such a believable manner.
Start your engine! 3, 2, 1, go!
The water effects aren't just for show though, in fact they are vital to the gameplay as well. Wave Race 64 is a racing game, sure, but it's playing with a different deck of cards than most. Rather than just having the tracks take place on a custom-built waterway, they instead take place within large bodies of water, with the tracks being marked by buoys. The game requires you to pass these buoys on a specified side, and if you manage to achieve that, you get a performance boost, up to 5 charges. Pass on the wrong side, and you lose all your charges, which will give the other racers a chance to catch up and pass you. Miss 5 and you're out of the race completely. This is tough enough as is, but then you throw in the fact that the water isn't still, and it becomes even harder. So it's not as simple as just finding the right line and staying in it. You need to compensate for the waves throwing you off your line as well. This makes for an intense racing experience, as it often feels like you're fighting against nature as you race. It's fun to hit a wave and get launched into the air, right up the back of a wave and then pick up speed as you roll down the other side, or take a tight curve as the waves bounce underneath you, threatening to pitch you off your jet ski and into the water and last place. It's so much fun and unlike any other racing game I have played.
Hey, the final lap! Okay. Maximum power!
That being said, Wave Race 64 is not without its issues. For starters, the controls take some getting used to. One thing that you need to wrap your head around is that the control stick isn't exactly controlling a rudder, but rather your racer on an axis. So if you want to make those tight turns, you need to be sure you rotate the stick back towards the bottom in order to make your rider put more weight on the back of the jet ski. These are jet skis too, so letting off the throttle or hitting the non-existent brake isn't advised either. The other big issue is the content. There are only 4 racers to play as, and you only have 8 tracks to race on. To compensate for that, you only get to race on all the tracks if you play on the highest difficulty, and you need to have a certain amount of points at the end of each race in order to keep going. It will take a few tries to master the ins and outs of the gameplay, but it's all achievable within a few sit-downs. There's also a stunt mode and a 2-player multiplayer, but not much else with great interest. Thankfully, Wave Race 64 is common and cheap. You'll probably find a couple of copies in bargain bins in most retro game stores. Despite being a sequel to such an unnoteworthy game, Wave Race 64 would go on to become the next big hit on the console following the launch of the N64, going player's choice and being a consistent seller up until the end of the console's life cycle. The game would be followed by a sequel on the GameCube called Blue Storm, but it didn't impress in the same way the N64 game did, and many felt that the gameplay and controls were overtuned. Since then, there hasn't been another game in the series, and it's something I would love to see, especially considering how amazing the water effects were in Mario Kart World. Then again, I'd wager Wave Race would be a tough sell today. In fact, I argue that Wave Race 64 has fallen out of popularity as people likely won't think too much of it now and pass on it in favor of bigger games from the N64 like Super Mario 64. If you're one of those people, do yourself a favor and give it a go. It's one of my personal favorites on the console and one I will likely revisit again in the future.
First and got 7 points. Great. Move on to the next round.